we got Dante here from Hella Defense Solutions, and we have Adrian also here.
Almost forgot your name.
It happens sometimes, bro. So today we're going to discuss a few topics. I've been trying to avoid these topics because I don't like getting into, I guess, sensationalism and stuff like that. I'm certainly not one of those people trying to bait like race wars and all that other dumb stuff because there's a lot of very emotional knee-jerk reactions. So I usually just stay away, wait for the stuff to settle. But I had to speak because this relates to something that I had experience with. It relates to something that's important to me. It relates to some stuff that needs to be spoken on. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening with Atlanta. The police department's there. Other police departments are watching. You got New York. You got Seattle. Other places are looking and figuring out what they want to do in terms of defunding. Cops are trying to figure out what they're going to do, try to keep their jobs and keep the status quo that they know. And it's about time for me to do some talking. So I'm going to share my insight as a former law enforcement officer. I'm going to share my insight as a lifetime proponent for justice and empowerment of people in a way of good. And I'll just share my insight as just a human, who cares about living life, being happy, being free, and having others that are happy, free, and able to live their life in the pursuit of happiness. Just doing their thing, because there's a lot of injustices that we see happening. There's a lot of imbalance, and the only way you have balance and justice is by holding people accountable. There's no way for laws to work if the law is only applicable in certain situations. It has to be applicable the same across the board. It doesn't work if you have special conditions where you have special immunity, what color your suit is, your skin. None of that stuff works if there's exceptions to the rule, because then the rules mean nothing. So I'm gonna let Dante talk. He set off. We're just gonna share our thoughts and information and go from there.
Alright, so basically what we want to do today is, or what I had in mind for us to do today is to come at this from both sides. There are a lot of people who are speaking right now and a lot of people who are commenting on the Rayshard shooting who don't really have all of the facts and who don't really have really any experience or information on the different techniques and policies and things of that nature. So as Adrian said, he's a former law enforcement officer, so he has training, he has information, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak just from an average person's point of view, and what I saw and what I heard are things that I've read, and he's basically just going to talk and rebuttal what I said. So it's going to be kind of a debate, All right. Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed by the police last week after being found asleep in his car outside of the Wendy's. Right? Well, here's the thing. Information has come out that he was drunk, that it was a DUI. He was asleep in his car, and the police had to come and wake him up and get him out the way. After them talking to him and everything, realizing he was intoxicated, they performed a sobriety test on him. He failed the sobriety test, and they proceeded to try to take him in for the DUI. He resisted arrest, which led to the shooting. Right? I understand that he was running away and or he had begun to flee the scene, but in the process of that, he grabbed and took the officer's taser.
Yeah, you fought with him?
Right. He fought with the officer, took his taser, ran, turned and pointed it at the officer and fired him. Which led to the officer drawing his weapon and shooting him. He was obviously in fear for his life.
Okay, so my whole thing is the whole basis of the law is based off of a reasonable person, a reasonable act and response. The biggest issue, I'm going to read first from the Georgia Code. This is the law, right? This is what law enforcement is supposed to be basing their training and their actions off of. So, Georgia Code, Title 16, Crimes and Offenses, 16.321, alright? A person is justified in threatening or using force against another when and to the extent that he or she reasonably believes that such threat or force is necessary to defend himself or herself or a third person against such other's imminent use of unlawful force. However, except as provided in Code Section 16.323, a person is justified in using force which is intended or likely to cause death or great bodily harm only if he or she is reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent death or great bodily injury to himself or herself or a third person or to prevent the commission of a forcible felony. I'm going to continue to read all of it so nobody can say I'm cherry picking. A person is not justified in using force under the circumstances specified in Section A of this code section if he, 1. initially provokes the use of force against himself with the intent to use such force as an excuse to inflict bodily harm upon the assailant, 2. is attempting to committing or fleeing after the commission or attempted commission of a felony, 3. was the aggressor or was engaged in combat by agreement unless he withdraws from the encounter and effectively communicates to such other person his intent to do so, and the other, notwithstanding, continues or threatens to continue to use unlawful force. C. Any rule, regulation, policy of any agency of the state or any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, or policy of any county, municipality, or other political subdivision of the state which is in conflict with this code section shall be null, void, and of no force and effect. D. In a persecution for murder or manslaughter, if a defendant raises as a defense a justification provided by subsection A of this code, the defendant, in order to establish the defendant's reasonable belief that the use of force or deadly force was immediately necessary, may be permitted to offer 1. relevant evidence that the defendant has been the victim of acts of family violence or child abuse committed by the deceased, as such acts are described in sections 1913.1 and 1915.1 respectively, and relevant expert testimony regarding the condition of the mind of the defendant at the time of the offense, including those related facts and circumstances relating to the family violence or child abuse that are the basis of the expert's opinion. Points there. The key points are: the person is justified only in using deadly force if they have justification to believe that there is imminent threat of great bodily harm and or death.
Can I jump in there? Okay. All right, so you're saying that he's justified in using force if he believes he's in danger.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah, great bodily harm or death.
Okay, so I'm tussling with this gentleman, and he grabs my taser. He turns it, he points it at me and fires it. I believed I was in harm. I believe that I was in danger.
So, I'm going to just preface this first by saying the officer in question was poorly trained. This is evidenced by two things I saw from the reports in the video. One, he had a DUI and he called another officer to do the investigation for that DUI. He should have been able to do that by himself. The fact that he called another officer to the scene who later came and did those duties shows that he was not properly trained. Poorly trained. The second point being, if he's properly trained, he would know that a taser has limited applications. A taser can only fire one single projectile without being reloaded. The single projectile I'm speaking of fires 2 barbs typically. The limited range of that device is within 10 yards. After that, you have almost no accuracy. and the weapon is inoperable, meaning that it cannot fire another round without being reloaded. Okay? So if the proper training was in place and the officer knew his training, knew his equipment, knew the use of his equipment, he would have known that this weapon, after being discharged, was no longer a operable and viable threat. As such, he should not have used deadly force in this.
Okay, so what would you say he should have done if not that? Because if he's in a situation where he's being threatened, or he believed he was being threatened, what else would you have him do? I don't see where he had too much more of another option.
Well, there's this thing called force spectrum of force. So if someone is trying to run, you chase after him, you fight him, you force him to the ground, gain control. You only escalate that use of force when it is deemed reasonable and necessary. So if you see him reaching for a weapon, or he's going to threaten someone else with deadly force, then you escalate to prevent that imminent death or great bodily harm. So if the dude's running, you simply chase after him. Just because someone doesn't comply, or just because someone's running, doesn't mean that they have warranted capital punishment, hasn't warranted death. Good.
Cops are allowed to use deadly force when a person is fleeing from them.
The cop may only use deadly force in which situation the person has, one, already displayed the ability and intent to use deadly force on the officers or others, and two, has the ability to enact deadly force. So if somebody shoots a gun, right, and then they throw the gun down, they're running, you can't shoot that person anymore, which is comparable to the situation with this taser. The guy fired a taser, and the taser is now no longer able to fire. You cannot shoot that person at that point. It's not morally or legally appropriate. It's just that simple.
So you think that he should have lost his job when he was actually just performing his duties?
If his duties, his training told him to fire on people as they run away, then yes, he should lose his job. He should be held accountable for a murder of someone who was no longer a imminent threat. You can't be an imminent threat running away with no weapons. You say he has a weapon, he had a taser. The taser will only be able to function as a weapon through direct skin to tool contact. The taser would have to be applied to someone. He couldn't do that running away. He couldn't reload it because he doesn't have the equipment to reload it. He's running away. He's not a threat. The only way he might have been a threat if he's running towards someone else, maybe, and he's going to taser them to death or choke them or something like that. But that's where the pursuit, and if you needed to, maybe in that time he could have shot. But that's not what happened. The gentleman fired a shot, was running, and was killed. Even, I can maybe see the argument perhaps if he's running towards the cops trying to further aggress. But he's fleeing at that point.
Okay. So it's easy for people to say those things from the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. So what would you have done if it was you?
Well, I can't say what I would have done in the exact situation, but I can go back to similar situations that I've been in. When you're in a situation with someone, you use the reasonable force necessary to effect the arrest. The reasonable force necessary in that situation was not deadly force. If someone's fighting with you, you fight with them. If you're losing the fight, if they're going for your weapons and you have no other recourse, then you escalate and you use the force necessary. But, I mean, that's part of the job. As a cop, you get in fights. You can't kill everyone you get in a fight with. You can't kill people for not complying. If someone is posing an imminent threat to you or someone else, then you can use reasonable force to effect the arrest. And if that's deadly force, then you use that. It's just, like I said, if anyone else shot somebody running away, there would be an open and shut case. But since he's a cop, everybody's doing all this quarterbacking, saying, basically people are saying that it's expected that if you do not comply, you die. And that's the problem. You cannot have that as the standard. If you just do not comply with a cop, you should not be killed instantly. That is a problem with the culture of America and a problem with the culture of police departments. That's why the cops are so shocked. It's like, how dare you bring murder charges against us? He didn't listen. He fought. He's dead. That's what happens when you fight with a cop. That's not reasonable. That shouldn't be acceptable. And the fact that that is the justification of so many people, that he fought back and he's dead, that's his fault, is ridiculous. It's just beyond ridiculous. It shows how he should have, going from the information, he should have been booked for a DUI. But being booked for a DUI doesn't mean he should be murdered. If he fights, that's a natural thing to try to fight. If you're being arrested, every creature in the world will try to resist that type of force. It's natural. You see dogs, run when the dog catcher shows up. You see cats scream and try to scratch you when you grab them tail, or you try to pet them. Like, it's a natural reaction to knowing that you're going to be possibly caged, and or what else will happen. It's natural. And when that used to happen, when I worked as a cop, it was expected that, like, all right, people might fight when you try to arrest them. You just fight them and then get them in cuffs. You don't kill them. If he was running towards a gun, or he had another projectile weapon he could use that was deadly, I can understand it. But knowing the taser, you know it as a single fire instrument. After it's fired, it's no longer able to do that. You're not in a threat of imminent danger or great bodily harm. I don't know what else to say. How many ways to say it?